Okay. We are now recording. So I suppose we can start because we are quite strict on the time. And I think if we all participate and have a lively discussion, it's going to run out quite soon. So thank you all for joining. First of all, thank you to the participants for joining in such a short time span. I'm very happy that we could gather all of these amazing experts and have an almost all Romanian panel on this matter, because I think it was very important to gather Romanian professionals and communicate to the European and international audience what is going on in Romania from our perspective as well, and most importantly from a more professional and informed perspective, so that what the public sees isn't just headlines that point to despair and the destruction of the rule of law. So without further ado, the idea behind this webinar is that of providing an overview on the Romanian election crisis from an interdisciplinary perspective. So we will have contributions ranging from the legal aspects, namely me and Dragoș, commenting both on the decision of the Constitutional Court with which the elections were annulled on December 6th, as well as the broader legal aspects of this situation, namely what has been going on against TikTok, like the initiations of proceedings by the Commission yesterday. We will also have some more technical contributions by Florent, who is going to present how TikTok was exactly manipulated. This topic will also be addressed by Madalina from Expert Forum, who are going to show how the platforms were utilized to spread disinformation and propaganda, the technical aspects, the data aspects thereof. I don't have the required technical expertise to elaborate more on these matters, so I will leave it up to them. But essentially, it will give us an understanding of how platforms are being used in Romania to spread disinformation and propaganda. Tana is going to highlight the perspective of the civil society in this context. So she's going to discuss how the civil society has been active in this context. I think this is a very important contribution because the decision of the Constitutional Court comes also as a result of the very pressing action by the civil society of Romania in this context. And finally, Veronica and Eugen are going to give a broader perspective. Veronica is going to highlight and discuss how not just the diaspora has been contributing and acting in this context. Veronica was also participating in the expert report that DG Humanism created, which is what Florent's been discussing. And so she's going to highlight not just her contribution in this context, but also more specifically how the diaspora contributed to highlighting what was going on in Romania, bringing in the examples of the Moldovan elections. So discussing a bit how this propaganda, this information that is being spread is shared and operated also in other countries in the former Eastern Bloc. Let's call it as such. Finally, Eugen is going to give a very interesting angle. Eugen has a background in philosophy and technology, and he's going to be discussing a bit more of the philosophical challenges and issues that arise from these newer technologies, and specifically how the question of critical thinking really is affected by these new technologies. How can we talk about critical thinking in this context? How do we as intelligent people are so easily manipulated on platforms? So this is our overview. I will give a brief presentation of each of the panelists. And then I will give the floor to, I think, Madalina first and foremost for this. So just to start, Madalina Voinea is the coordinator of disinformation combating programs at the Romanian think tank Expert Forum, specializing in digital monitoring, international relations, and political analysis. She focuses on mapping disinformation targeting the Black Sea region, particularly narratives aimed at discrediting Ukraine. Additionally, Madalina is part of the China Watch program, where she contributes to the China Index, the first program tracking the influence of the People's Republic of China globally, managed by the Taiwanese think tank Doublethink Lab. After her, we will have Veronica Cretu, who is a citizen of the Republic of Moldova and Romania, based in Vienna since 2018. With over 20 years of experience in the public sector reform, open government, and AI governance, Veronica has worked across more than 20 countries, among which Moldova, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Nepal, Zimbabwe, and Mexico. Veronica serves as an envoy with the Open Government Partnership. She's a member of the Council of Europe Committee on AI and a co-founder of the Moldova for EU Diaspora Task Force. She's currently working with the World Bank on digital governance and citizen engagement. She holds an MA in Artificial Intelligence for Government and one in Contemporary Diplomacy with professional development from institutions such as Harvard Center for International Development, Georgetown University, and the Center for AI and Policy and Dialogue, among others. Then we will have Florent Lefebvre, who is the chief data scientist at DigiHumanism, the Center for AI and Digital Humanism, who is a think tank established in Luxembourg in October 2024. We will then be hearing from Tana Foarfa, who is the director of Europuls, Center of European Expertise, and also the 2022 national winner of the European Charlemagne Youth Prize for organizing the largest forum on EU affairs in Romania, the Eurostat Forum. Tana was included in the top Forbes 30 under 30 in 2023 in Romania for her contribution and expertise of EU economic policies, and she has authored and published more than 40 articles on EU affairs, EU funds, EU economic governance, and the Recovery and Resilience Facility in national and European publications. Then we will be hearing from Dragoș Ivan, who is a lawyer specialized in criminal law, as well as a lecturer, author, and researcher specialized in EU law. Dragoș teaches EU law at the Faculty of Law of the Bucharest University of Economic Studies, and is also a volunteer teacher of legal education for young people in high school. Finally, besides me, you'll be hearing from Eugen Octav Popa, who is an assistant professor in ethics and philosophy technology and managing editor of Science and Engineering Ethics. As part of his research, he works on the relationship between technologies and our moral universe. Eugen also has participated in various EU and Dutch research projects, as he is an assistant professor at the TU Delft, and works around the social ethical dimension of technologies within the energy systems, with a particular focus for hydrogen and solar fuels, artificial photosynthesis. Eugen also has a side philosophy podcast, which is quite known in Romania, which is Podcastul de Filosofia, who currently has, if memory doesn't fail me, over 11,000 subscribers, correct? This is our panel of speakers. So without further ado, I give the floor to Madalina for around 10 minutes to discuss the expert forum report on the use of TikTok in the context of the elections, but more broadly, how disinformation also is spread in Romania and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I also share my screen, or should it be like, yeah, sure. Thank you very much for having me today, and I'll be mindful of the time. If you can please confirm you can see my screen. Yeah. Yeah. So it was a tricky year. We at Expert Forum have multiple branches. One of the main ones this year was Fair Vote, votecorrect.ro, which is an initiative that has basically sparked the interest in everything I monitored this year from an election perspective. I will talk about more if I have some time about VoteCorrect. If you're interested, it's independent observers on the ground, election monitoring, a website for voter information. So a comprehensive approach we've been doing in the last 10 years to assure voter information. I'm specifically working on information monitoring online, which is unfortunately a loophole in our society in multiple ways, from our curricula, from our vulnerabilities as a society, and my colleagues, I'm sure, are going to discuss more about that. Why this matters and why this introduction matters. You can see in the last few years, we have started to take a closer look at TikTok as a consequence of what is happening in our society, which is a rise of extremism that's happening all over Europe. Let's say the national flavor, it's not new, and the far-right temptation in Romania, it's not new. And I would like to highlight that not the rise of a far-right candidate is the surprise that Romanians saw, is that the whole infrastructure of the far-right built, mainly our party led by George Simion, and also SOS Romania, were not the parties that benefited from this infrastructure. SOS, obviously, because its candidate was banned from ruling in the presidential elections, but neither our was the winner of the infrastructure built on TikTok. It was an entire new candidate that built an infrastructure from scratch. And this is, let's say, a first interesting technical peculiarity, that the whole network of accounts and supporters of the far right that was directed to before the first presidential round, it was not tied to the actual candidate Călin Georgescu. This is an entire new network of supporters and accounts that were initially and obviously against our candidate that was a contender in the first presidential elections. So this is an interesting surprise in how this new network managed to infiltrate. And it would be very interesting to also have the discussion of how a new candidate managed to build the infrastructure from scratch and why it matters and why the discussion is this time, unfortunately or fortunately, focused on TikTok, is because the reality is that before election, he campaigned mostly online with little or no events relevant in real life. He declared zero funding to national authorities, even though he had a massive infrastructure of promotion in the online environment. I'm sure that if you want to discuss further on the type of character and the dictator-like speech he has, what are his intentions in the totalitarian directions, banning elections and so on, I'm more than interested in discussing that as well. However, I like to discuss about two realities that coexist in Romania. One is the fact that we do have a huge division. We have a real anti-system vote and a real anti-system impression that created, let's say, the radicalization anti-system voting. However, how we ended up having the solution, not the real far-right infrastructure that is our, but actually transitioning this mass of voters to another candidate that basically mobilized people in the last few months is through social media. And here we had to look at social media consumption and how TikTok became equally, if not more relevant than Facebook for Romanian users. And in the last 2 years, we have started taking a closer look at that, mainly initially focusing on youth, because that was our interest. Is youth being radicalized by the far right? In general, in Romania, Hungary, Austria, and we had a little bit of a cooperation there with other NGOs. But specifically looking at Romania and at this election cycle, we started in September with Watchdog Moldova, one of the biggest NGOs in Moldova, looking at how is pro-Russian narratives, how are they infiltrating in Romania? Because historically, Romania is quite a Russophobic country due to multiple historical arguments. And we called it the Grand Pro-Putin narratives and how they infiltrate. Narratives that have actively migrated for this presidential campaign of Călin Georgescu. And this is a lot and obsessively focused around Ukraine and around how supporting Ukraine is a huge harm for Romanian security, which is a narrative recycled and repeated in the current, I'm saying current, but I'm actually have no idea when the next presidential elections will be in Romania. Since September, we identified, let's say, these type of clusters of narratives on TikTok, but were not directly linked with Călin Georgescu. I'm just skipping a little bit because I'm trying to get to the actual point. The actual point is that here you see, and I hope you still see, here you see an evolution of one of the main hashtags of the two main candidates that were qualified in the second round, Călin Georgescu on the left and Elena Lasconi on the right. And while you can see a real steady increase for Elena Lasconi on this specific main hashtag that only illustrates part of the spike, you can see on the other hand on Călin Georgescu, and this is his main hashtag used on TikTok up to this day, that it was basically an implosion of content created in the last month before elections in order to invade feeds for the Romanian audience. And this invasion needs to be discussed in a context. What does it mean? Because a lot of voices are saying, yes, but other candidates also had virality. It's very different. When you are a candidate that has an infrastructure that mainly creates positive content about you, it's one. When you have enemies and fans, it's completely the opposite, as Marcel Ciolacu and Elena Lasconi had. George Simion, on the other hand, has a real infrastructure of supporters, and you can now, after the election, he is very closely tied his audience with Călin Georgescu. Of course, alliance is the only way for them now. But he has built this infrastructure in more than 3 years on TikTok specifically, and more than that offline. Călin Georgescu managed in less than totally, let's say, since September, but the spikes, really heavy spikes, are since the beginning of November to gain this much traction. And then we started analyzing these accounts. This is a small part of how these spikes were created. This is an influencer campaign. Here we can discuss about the liability of the intermediary service, which was a micro-influencer platform that allowed for influencers that literally, I believe, they didn't know what they were doing necessarily, which was a campaign to basically describe the perfect president. And then it was the army of volunteers that started to make the connection and obsessively promote the candidate. Further than that, it's a coordinated network of accounts that were only even speculating. And why are we only even speculating? We as civil society and even the secret services that say that they discovered 25,000 accounts. Because the transparency of the platform is not there. Like, it's not comparable to Meta that we're also criticizing in a lot of ways, but I would totally like not to mix this type of behavior. We have coordinated network of accounts that started from diaspora and that their, let's say, location is based in diaspora that still exists. They have not been considered in authentic coordinated behavior, even though they have a very specific pattern of what we call an influence operation, meaning naming conventions, meaning a coordinated pattern of distributing content, commenting, and posting at specific hours. More than that, a huge problem is the paid political ads problem that has little to no transparency. Little to no transparency of who is the actual company that paid for the ads or the user, the amount or the impact it had. They are constantly unavailable in TikTok library. And it's a very big loophole that we're fighting to this day. The platform insists is not a political platform, but it's just a reflection of the society. If the society is political, if the debate is political, so is the platform. The spikes and the trending hashtag after the elections were obviously political for a platform that is not prepared to handle it, not even to acknowledge it. And this creates a huge loophole for abuse. You can see here that top comments from top content creation accounts for Elena Rasconi were accounts that are easily traceable in real life, from supporters, USR influencers, USR Tineret. Most of them have at least 1 million views on their content because they created a lot. On the other hand, if you try to analyze on Călin Georgescu this type of hashtag, you have such a granular view that the only accounts that have above at least 500,000 are accounts that it's his official account, a duplicate, and his wife. More than that, you see accounts that have little traceability in real life. And these are what we call fan-based accounts. I'm gonna skip to the end of my points. And I'm gonna close with what can be done in terms of platform regulation. And the answer is a lot. Not much is being done, and that is the fair answer. Researcher access, it's a shame. We need months to prepare and collect data for what should be available research for access. The API does little. It just basically gives you less information that you would get to data scraping, that it's harder and you have a lot of limitation, but it's better in terms of what you receive. More than that, little to no transparency into political ads. We can only speculate what we find now, and this is just the tip of the iceberg because the platform doesn't offer this type of access and the proper content library in terms of ads. And the regulation of fan-based accounts is the last thing I'm closing with, which is a huge loophole of coordinated, inauthentic networks that pretend to be fashion and anything else, and it's literally a circus that we're pretending they are not exclusively creating political content. This needs to be done now. And without this, the platform is just going to continue to allow this type of abuse and interference in the electoral process. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Madalina. That was incredibly interesting. May I actually note to the audience that if they have particular questions for our speakers, it would be good to put them through in the Q&A as they're speaking so that I can redirect them during our discussion. Thank you. I now give the floor to Florent, who's going to build upon this with his presentation of the DG Humanism report on the specific use of TikTok in the context of the elections.
Thank you, Alina. So I'm a data analyst who work for Disinhumanism, just for this task. Disinhumanism is a think and do tank, which aim to ensure humanistic governance of artificial intelligence in Europe and beyond. And for this task, I like to put the focus. We study it only early December. So, and this has a huge impact on the following study. So my work is usually to not study contents or not study channels, but to study audience. Crowd, what an usual user of TikTok can see if he connect to TikTok and follow a hashtag, or just what will be suggest in his usual use of the social network. So to do that, we go by steps. So first of all, we get shorts, TikTok shorts, by using the search engine. So we search some hashtag list by precedent study, and we try to get hashtag and so data on all subject relative to the Romanian election. So each candidate, each hashtag that has been trending in some way, and some more general hashtag Romania, etc., to have content. So this gave us 3,000 video. But and with this we refine the video section. So we filter all videos that have no comments, are not interesting for us. If a video is not seen by anybody, I can't study people that have seen it. So first pass to remove all the small videos that have pretty much no audiences. And with that, we expand the video sample. So for each channel that we have an interesting video, I have catch the 10 most recent video. So with 1,000 channel, we get 38,000 video, and after I refilter the remaining to keep only videos that have I'm sure that is related to this election. So each video must have the name of candidate, votam, etc., to be sure to have the relevant video about the Romanian election. And for each remaining video, I get all the commands that I can. So 1.5 million commands. So a big data sample, a really big data sample, but not related to the TikTok API. Only related to what I can see on the Romanian TikTok network. And for that, I geolocalize I create and geolocalize TikTok accounts in Romania, France, and Great Britain to do this search, to know what Romanian based in France can see if he search Simon Ken Georgescu, what Romanian in Romania can see if he search Votam Romania, etc. To have a sample that correspond to what an user can see early December when he is on the TikTok platform and when he use search the search engine. And with that, I map all audiences. So for the mapping, I use comments. Like I say, I get comments. Comments is one of the most engaged form of what an user can do on the channel. You can like, you can just see it entirely. You can share it. But comments it was one of the most engaged form to show that you have seen the video, you want to see more, and this is all social media platform use your engagement to see what do you think about that. Do you want to see more? Do you is it a content relevant to you? Do you have skip it quickly, or do you have write a big comment to share your feeling about the video, etc., to maximize the retention of the platform? All social network want to engage user in the content they consume. So for each people that I've met content of a channel, each user that I've met the content is linked to the channel that is put a content. So for example, and Ken Georgescu and Ezilview have a lot of comments in common because they are linked to the same people, pretty much to the same people, and each link puts them together. So each community is based on green armor linked between green. Green share more their audience between green than between green and blue. And so we have a big community, big cluster with that show that this pool of audience. We have many people that comment the same video, the same channel, and this is why they are in this place in the network, because they pull each comment puts them together, and why they are in this color, this cluster, because a cluster is just an optimization to have one color have more chance to be linked together to have the same audience than two different colors. So with this, we have 1,000 channels. Nearly 500,000 commenting accounts of different users. Linked by 1.5 million comments, etc. And with it, I make a stat because I don't care what about a particular user do, but I want to know why the blue shares their audience and why what is the difference with the green, for example. So with that, we can make some basic stats. So just to know what hashtag the blue community use. And the blue community use talk more about Ena Lasconi. And as Madalina say, Cosme is pro Ena Lasconi, so it gets together. But they talk also about Algeri and Ken Georgescu. etc. For each channel. But I like to highlight the fact that most community talk about Georgescu. Georgescu is a common word on all community. All community, even among the Ena Lasconi fans, people that support her, etc. People talk also about mostly about Georgescu. I will go faster. And after that, I study a sample of comments of on each community, because I'm mostly here to study comments, to study what the crow say and not what the content creator say. Because I like to really put the focus on this study was started early December. The 2 December, the data collection was the 2 December, and it's after TikTok claimed to have wiped out most of the fake contents on the platform. And after, as Madalina say, after the viral campaign where influencers were have promoted Ken Georgescu, and where a lot of them have deleted their content afterwards, because it was against their will. Most of them don't know they be part of the campaign for Ken Georgescu. So no matter to study content creator, when the study is done after the fact and after the moderation and after TikTok claimed to have already cleaned the platform. But even after the cleaning that TikTok claimed to be done, everyone still talk about Ken Georgescu, and all major communities talk about this, and even among the fan of Ena Lasconi, even Cosme, with which is pro Hélène Lasconi, people talk about Georgescu, and people insult Hélène Lasconi. We get to it later, but misogyny, anti-Semitism, and stuff. All these comments.
And to wrap up in a minute or so, because we're running out of time, unfortunately.
Okay.
We'll go over the
ouais.
rest during the Q&A.
Okay. Just after the cleaning, we have still many like threats, anti-Semitism, and all that have been not cleaned by TikTok. And what if I must finish on this? What I want to focus is this analysis is really an understatement of what happened during September, October, November, because it's after the cleaning. All of this is after the cleaning done by TikTok. It's not real time to be really close to the reality. We must done a real time analysis and get all this information day to day, not when a month later, when TikTok claimed to have clean it a week later, and most importantly, after everyone that have already seen this content. And most of all of this technique with the crowd, with real or fake crowd, have a really big impact of the recommendation. If you're pro Lasconi, but everyone that put a comment on the video is pro-Georgescu, the next video you have a chance to see is more probably a video pro-Georgescu. Because if TikTok sees that most of the audience is pro-Georgescu, it will not matter if the video is pro another candidate or anti-Georgescu. TikTok will base on the crowd to see what you're going to see next. And this is the exact same thing we've seen on the French legislative, where there is hundreds of videos with the name of the far-right candidate. And when you see generalist media, you really must, you have a really big chance to see, to enter to this far-right candidate ecosystem. Then you have to see all of their candidates. And this cause all this fan or bots, I don't study it, target the general media and influence the TikTok recommendation algorithm to say people that have seen the video are far right, so for the next people that are going to see it, show them far right content. And for the last part, I want to put all of this study should be done in real time to be really relevant, and should be done in the long term. Because as we see in Georgescu, his campaign start in September, and we have big progress in September, and this is at this time in September or in October that this study should have been done and should have been pertinent, not as post-mortem, but to prevent the impact of the election.
Okay, Laurent, thank you. I have to unfortunately interrupt you, but we may go over this after after all speakers are done during the Q&A, hopefully. In which case, I might ask the speakers, by the way, if we can leave the questions for the Q&A so that we can potentially address them together, because I think some of them might have a bit more of a transversal application or might be engaged by more than just one of us. So very quickly, now I give the floor to Veronica, who's going to bring in a broader perspective as well. Veronica also collaborated to the Humanism report, by the way.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Alina, for having me, and thank you for the initiative. I think it's really strategic to have these conversations and understand what is really happening across our countries and even broader. I think my motivation to contribute to Digihumanism report stemmed from what we lived through Moldova's elections earlier this fall. And before I share some specifics of the Moldovan context and how Russia meddled into our internal affairs and tried to compromise our EU path, but also democratic values and aspirations, I think what happened to Romania and the TikTok case speaks about a broader context. I think we need to take a step back and understand the broader ecosystem. And I would like to share some insights about understanding how Russia operates. How Russia operates not only across countries in the Eastern Partnership, you know, us, Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, those who have been aspiring throughout the past years to join the EU, but also across European Union. Maybe some of the ways and modalities Russia operates have been ignored by many, and unfortunately, we are where we are because we did not take preventive measures or we did not pay sufficient attention to the modus operandi of the Kremlin. I just want to highlight that there is a very big large body of research addressing this topic. And one of the reports that I will specifically refer to is the one on Divide and Rule, 10 lessons about Russian political influence activities in Europe. It goes back to 2019. Its aim was to look at the time span from 2014 to 2018. Nonetheless, the findings of the report are really, really relevant, and I'm sure that my colleagues in Romania, but we in Moldova as well, we have seen, you know, in real life, hands-on application of those tools in practice. And at the same time, there is a lot of first-hand experience shared by you know, Russian defectors during and after Cold War. I think it is important that we understand that what is happening today in our countries is not an overnight case. This is something that has been happening ever since the Cold War. And you see here on the screen, you know, the photo of the couple. I've listened to, I think, all of their interviews and lectures. They were Russian spies. They spent more than 20 years undercover in the U.S. Luckily, they thanks that they were arrested. They were sent back to Russia. They were exchanged here in Vienna. They are in Russia, but they are telling and sharing the stories about how, you know, Kremlin operates, and all those insights and intelligence is really, really something we need to pay more attention to. So the report looks into this 2019 report looks at the 40 annual reports from 15 security services of the 11 countries in Western Europe. And all those reports describe Russia as being the main intelligence threat. Although China and Iran are also mentioned, Russia still remains the main and the most important intelligence threat to the countries. It is described as a foreign state that tries to influence European politics and decision-making most, and its intelligence services are viewed as very competent, highly competent, with very intensive activities, and those activities back then in 2019, there was this prediction that they will not be reduced, and we know now that on the contrary, they have amplified, and the war in Ukraine is just a testament about how far Russia can go. If you listen to some of the notorious Ukrainian analysts, I think throughout the past 3 years, they've been reiterating over and over that Russia's influence are characterized by long-term determination rather than thinking short-term, which is why you might have seen in this TikTok experience of Romania, you know, how some actors, some candidates have been active throughout the past years, and others were more active on the last 100 meters. So Russia operates with kind of more active and latent kind of approach, and it activates those whenever needed. The three main strategic objectives that we need to be aware of are the follows. The regime in Kremlin wants to ensure its security and maintain their own power. They want to ensure predominance in Russia's near abroad. Usually these are the countries in the former Soviet Union, excluding the Baltic states, but this rhetoric has suffered changes since February 22. Russia mentioned quite often other countries like Poland, also the Baltic countries, and others. And one of the longest term objective of the Kremlin is to weaken the two major Western alliances, which is NATO and the European Union. You know, when it comes to the strategy, the way it operates, it uses the divide and rule strategy, because this is something that helps create distrust and fragmentation at a number of levels. One is undermining alliances like NATO and the EU, fueling tensions and distrust between different countries, and of course creating at the intrastate level internal divisions within individual countries, social, ethnic, political groups. We have seen emergence of those across the EU member countries in the past years. And why this is important for them, it's because the more fragmented Europe will be, the easier it is for Russia to control and manipulate. And there are a number of tools that it uses. It's information operations and disinformation. It does through the Russia's controlled media, state media, Sputnik, Russian TV. They use those channels to spread disinformation globally. They use social media to spread pro-Kremlin narratives, to mobilize protests around the world, to manipulate public opinion through bots, fake accounts. They use social media with comments to disrupt discussions. They hack information, and so on. There is another rhetoric, I think another really important aspect, which is something that they use. It's the so-called promoting and protecting the Russian world and their minorities abroad. And under this umbrella of protecting their Russian minorities abroad, they work through a number of agencies. They have front organizations such as NGO think tanks, and they exist. They exist in Romania, they exist in Moldova, they exist across, I think, every single EU member country. They use local pro-Russian media, they work through their embassies, and what is interesting is they finance and they develop ties with both radical left and radical right-wing extremist groups. Some of their activities, organizing protests around anti-refugee, anti-migrant, anti-LGBT community, military-style training is something that they also do. Demonstrations, provocations are just a few examples. Another important tool is human intelligence and the way it targets certain groups, decision makers. And believe me, decision makers in your government and in Moldova's government, mid-level officials, future leaders. So they have their modality to infiltrate within organizations, within structures, within public institutions. They work closely with people in power, and this is the way they compromise the status quo overall. Cyber operations, there are a number of tactics they use in terms of cyber operations, and we've heard more and more reports recently. And one of the modalities is disrupting elections. The report from 2019 makes reference to the US presidential elections, but I'm sure now with whatever happened in Romania, Moldova, we may have those studies documented as well. Some of other important elements that they use is energy dominance, and this is something that Moldova is undergoing right now, threatening with gas supplies, business and corruption. What they do strategic investments across our countries. They lobby, they are involved in corruption schemes, and then they use those to compromise the image and reputation of the political and decision makers in our countries. Organized crime, Russian Orthodox Church. I think the church is something that they've been using really actively, including in Moldova. I think we honestly believe that every single priest that is affiliated with the church right now has to do with secret services, data collection, promoting disinformation and propaganda, and literally brainwashing people, specifically across the rural areas. Historical manipulation. Russia has been very tactical about reconstructing history, using language issue history to manipulate and justify its actions, but also discredit local decision makers. And of course, military power is something that they use as ultimate coercive tool, but at the same time we see that it has happened with Ukraine being invaded in 2022. Very brief about Moldova's elections and constitutional referendum. As you may know, we had the constitutional referendum asking one important question. Do you support the amendment of the constitution for the purpose of the Republic of Moldova accession to the European Union? And this was something heavily manipulated in the social media, in the rhetoric, in the engagements with ordinary citizens on the ground, because basically the Russian propaganda was manipulating and distorting the question. It's like, do you? They positioned this question as if we are asking the population to vote. Do we agree to join the EU or not? So it was the way they speculated on the question in the first place. What you see, the results are very. I mean, oh my God, I remember we got to the point in the midst of the night when it was like 50-50, and it was really probably one of the scariest things ever. We made it with a tiny margin, and we see our diaspora, the Moldovan diaspora, has played, and it has always played in the past elections, a crucial role. We always kind of say, yes, we are saving the situation because we vote for pro-EU values, for pro-EU aspirations. What is interesting to pay attention to is the difference between how many voted for yes in the referendum in Transnistria, which is a Russian-controlled occupied region, but also in Gagauzia that has predominantly have a Turkish population that predominantly speak Russian and is heavily influenced by Russian propaganda. So although Gagauzia did receive a lot of support from the European Union, on roads reconstruction, schools, hospitals, and so on, and there are, those tons of billboards across the region with how much EU has supported the region. Still, because of the way the former leaders of Gagauzia, which are Russian puppets, have compromised and portrayed the government in Chisinau in a very negative light, this has generated the results that you see on the screen. And one important thing that happened, and I'm really happy
to wrap up in a minute, if I may. I'm sorry, but we're running out of time.
Okay, doing my best. I think one important investigative journalistic activity that took place was that by Ziarul de Gardă that went undercover and spent about a few months within the supporters from Shor Party, which is Shor is a businessman that hides in Russia, is a Russian puppet. So through that network, Russia has paid a lot of money. You see $39 million in 2 months to change the outcomes of the elections in the country. The money came through a banned Russian bank and reached about 100,000 users or voters. And that is official data by the General Police Inspectorate. You see what tools, and this is the video. So basically 2 journalists from Ziarul de Gardă, they spent a few months video recording everything that was happening inside those groups. Telegram was used massively for internal communication by the supporters of the Shor Party. We see how money has been provided through the banking cards. We see how pro-Russian, Russia-backed candidate for the presidential elections is discrediting EU and US. So there are videos in which she is using a lot of details about, America and the US is literally buying our people, our brains. Everything that is currently done through the referendum is to destroy us as a nation, to destroy our economy. Again, this is the Russian type of propaganda. They have stolen out our 30 years of history. Everything is being done to destroy us as a nation, as an identity. Language issues have been always brought into the elections campaign. Why Romanian? Yeah, indeed, we speak Romanian, and they always use this rhetoric that Moldova has a Moldovan language, which is not true. This language does not exist. Sure, promising beautiful and happy life. There were a lot of techniques discrediting Maia Sandu, the current president, over and over through different channels. Moscow has been openly providing grants to travel to Russia to build some sort of connections. And anti-referendum rhetoric was just insane. Things like the constitution will be amended regarding sexuality. The propaganda of homosexuality will be allowed. By the age of 9, kids will engage in sexual relations in schools. All our land and properties will be taken by Romanians because Romanians lived in Moldova in the 1930s. They will take everything from us. So that's all about Maia Sandu and the European Union. And one important thing, so basically what this undercover job showed is that Russia paid and supported every single candidate in the presidential campaign, except because the way they operated is like you can vote in the first round for any candidate, but not Maia. And one important thing is this bribery did not happen only at the level of ordinary citizens. This is a piece of press communique we had just a few days before the elections. That the group of 40 public servants employed with Agency for Public Service Delivery were identified as having received money as a reward for their votes, both in elections and in a referendum. And in presidential elections, basically all the people you see on the screen.
Wrap up very fast, and maybe we can go over the rest during the Q&A, but I have to give the floor to the speakers if you have a final.
Yes, it's just I wanted to show that in the diaspora, we really wanted to preserve and keep the EU path. And we had a lot of campaigns and we sensitized the community, raised awareness about the importance of the referendum. We were mitigating the propaganda and the disinformation. We were breaking those myths and stereotypes about the EU. We had a whole movement about that. We showed how to involve in the second round, how to support, and directly we encouraged not to be neutral, and we said straightforwardly to vote for Maia Sandu. And then when it comes to Romanian elections, we did our best to support the position of our current president and support Elena Lasconi in the second round. We also shared a lot about how Russia intervened into the Romanian elections. I supported the DG Humanism with data for the Romanian elections report. And of course, the main questions are what's next? We know that Russia will interfere in 2025 parliamentary elections. We know that EU opened investigations into the TikTok and Romanian elections. And in moving forward, there are lots of things that should be done. And one is to work more closely with our diasporas abroad, to educate and include mandatory programs on critical thinking, and do a sort of due diligence if you are hiring people with Russian nationality for different positions across academia, civil society, international organizations. Just be mindful about what their exact intention might be. With this, I will stop and happy to answer any questions in the Q&A part. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very insightful. So there seems to be quite some inaction or problems, structural issues with authorities. So what has the civil society done, Tana, that you can tell us about?
Yes, thank you very much, and I was glad to listen to the presentations and elements highlighted by the previous speakers. I think that from this point I will actually focus on the next step, because while it is true that there was a lot of disinformation and the ground was populated by propaganda and fake news, there is still an additional step to determine a person to go and concretely vote. Because after all, if we look at the results of the elections, we see that Călin Georgescu managed to raise more than 2 million votes, and therefore we have to understand a bit how exactly these citizens, the Romanian citizens, were determined to make the step and to go and put the stamp concretely on Călin Georgescu. So from this point of view, I will tackle and I will show to you two different examples from the activity of the NGO I am running, so Europuls. We are a center of expertise which already is celebrating almost 15 years of the anniversary. Our aim is basically to bring the EU agenda and the EU topics closer to the Romanian citizens. So we steer the debates and we manage to translate the difficult language that sometimes make the citizens say that EU is very far away, the EU topics are very not understandable, people there are living in a bubble and so on, and they do not understand our needs and our necessities. And we are bringing them together in dialogue with the stakeholders, so with the Romanian representatives, both at national level and at EU level. We do that with people that are from the business sector, from media, citizens, normal citizens, but also in particular with young people. And since 2019, we have been conducting a thorough literacy, so media literacy campaign, but also, so to say, electoral literacy for the young people that are aged 16 and over, because these are basically the next and the upcoming voters. We started doing that ever since 2019 with the European elections, and we continued, of course, this year. It was very interesting from us to see from our trainings that we provided in high schools and universities, so in person, to have a variety of findings. So first of all, when we were asking high school students about what types of political personalities they know, with which type they interacted, or if they can name, for instance, a politician that they follow, every time they were referring to the most visible politicians that they have on TikTok, and namely, of course, the extremist ones, because unfortunately, we have to see and to confess the fact that the traditional parties did not invest properly enough tools and resources to understand, so not only to invest money, but to understand the mechanisms of the social media and how exactly to make use of them positively in order to be able to deliver the message to the citizens. So the first thing is that the young people were extremely eager and were consulting the information and knowing about politics and politicians in general from social media, namely TikTok and Instagram. This is something that we, of course, know, but this is extremely relevant because up until now, we did not expect or imagined that the young people will be so determined to pass from the simply, scrolling from TikTok or Instagram and to concretely vote for an extremist candidate. And if we look at the whole distribution on age of the over 2 million voters that voted for Călin Georgescu, we see that actually more than 1/3 of its voters are young people that are aged 18-24. So basically the first-time voters that went to the presidential elections were extremely encouraged by this disinformation campaign and propaganda and mass campaign that was delivered on TikTok to concretely come and put the stamp on Călin Georgescu. And if I may, because one of the second component that our NGO had is throughout the campaigns, we were also members of the polling station. So each of us basically registered to operate. This is how we do in Romania. You can register and apply to operate the specific digital tool with which you read the ID cards and so on. So basically you're an operator of this digital equipment, and we applied, each of us, in different areas in different cities. I was part of a polling station in Arlon. Arlon is a city that is between the Belgian and Luxembourg border. And here in this community, you have, from what I understood from the Romanians that came there to vote, there are around 2,000 or even 3,000 Romanians living in that region. Throughout the 3 days that we had experienced in the polling station, I have seen a lot of truck drivers, construction workers, people with small businesses or seasonal workers that were in that area, coming in the polling station, and all of them saying or even shouting or even, you know, trying to highlight a very specific and distinct phrase: we want change. So this whole idea of change was extremely outspoken throughout the 3 days, and it was outspoken with such a passion and such a determination and a focus that actually, from my point of view, okay, I don't have many elections because I'm not that that old, so I have voted for the past decade, so to say, but I have never seen or never experienced people that went so determinedly to put the stamp on someone. So from this point of view, we started to be concerned about the whole. We knew, of course, about the networks and the propaganda. We have tried, and we made a lot of exercises to debunk it before the elections, so pre-elections, between the first round of the presidential elections, before the parliamentary, and so on. We did a lot of debunking, but it is only in the moment that we were in the polling station and we were consulting each other, you know, on our WhatsApp group, and seeing that we see the same pattern, no matter if we were based in Bucharest, in Arlon, in Brussels, or in Timișoara, we were experiencing the same message and the same pattern. From this point of view, we realized the harm and the danger, because it is more than just being exposed to disinformation, is acting for change. And what exactly determined these people to consider that a random person that they don't know could represent actually the change, for the change in good, of course, for their lives, right? Because they wanted the change in good for their whole family, for their personal lives, professional lives, and so on, from a person that they never met and they just randomly have seen on TikTok. So we tried to conduct specific polls and to ask around and so on, and we saw from our debunking exercises on social media that some people just were just telling us that actually they never knew the other candidates, so they just saw this guy. Some of them, they didn't even think he would have chances to go in the second round, so they just said, okay, I'm not interested, to be honest, in the vote, but I want to go to vote. I don't know who to put the stamp on, so I will put the stamp on this guy, because they didn't know the others. Others, they just believed concretely, like genuinely believed in what he was saying. And others were actually giving a negative vote. And I think most of them, I don't have the evidence, but from what we saw in social media, I think most of them were really channeled by this anger, this specific anger against the system that is clearly not functioning for their own well-being, and therefore they wanted to sanction the current system through this specific vote. So this is the way that we interpret it. Otherwise, the whole efforts that we did, and of course together with the other NGOs that have each of them specific areas of activity, but we complemented each other during this specific campaign, in which we tried to highlight the whole positive outcomes and to try to debunk as much as possible the propaganda. I have to say that we are fighting with, we are being sent in a battle and fighting with toy guns and fighting with people that really have the real guns, because we are fighting with extremely little resources. We are not able to counter. So for every positive messages or every comments with concrete information that we were providing on TikTok, we had 15 more bots coming and trolling us constantly. So our resources are not enough. And from this point of view, I think that a handful of NGOs cannot replace the professional activity that should have been done by the national authorities that are responsible to make sure that the elections are being conducted in an adequate and correct, as correct as possible environment. And here there are many discussions that can be put on the on our list, but of course I can leave them for Q&A. But I would state that without the adequate resources and without the adequate help from the national authorities, we as NGOs, we are the watchdogs. We are the people that are asking for transparency. There are the NGOs that we should thank for the public awareness of the information about the current infiltration of this type of activity conducted as it was mentioned in the Supreme Council of Defense of the country. So it is the NGOs we need to thank for, but the NGOs cannot replace the activity that should be conducted by the national authorities who are, after all, there to deliver. They're paid by from our taxes, and they should be there to deliver and to be transparent and to be held accountable when needed. I have to say that now, to conclude, so delimiting myself from my role as director of the NGO, so speaking only as a citizen. As a citizen, I would have expected to see some resignations, to see some people that are really understanding the responsibility of what they did or what they did not do, actually, to take, I mean, if they knew about the information, to really take the necessary actions. And from this point of view, I truly hope as a citizen to see, before we announce the calendar of the next presidential elections, to see a bit of a more maturity and responsibility in this sense from the national authorities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tana. So yes, indeed, there has been some failure to act on the part of the Romanian authorities, indeed, that has been remedied or attempted to be remedied by the Constitutional Court on December 6th. So Dragoș, could you tell us more about this decision and what it does?
Thank you, and thank you for the contribution of my colleagues, because it's really useful to talk about this subject from different points of view. So the decision by Romanian Constitutional Court to annul presidential election is without precedent. It's unprecedented. Yes, this is true, but tension was already there. We did not just land into this situation, but these tensions were already present, and there is a context, a legal context, a social context, and a specific chronology that led us to this subject. For example, regarding the part of the context, the loud general context before this decision was the right of any Romanian to run for office. This was presented in social media, was presented in the media, traditional media, and it became an important thing for everybody, the right of any Romanian to run for office. But the legal aspect behind this, which represented the silent background, is that not any Romanian can run from office, but only the Romanian, the citizen, that fulfills and meets the legal conditions. So we already had a problem beforehand, because lack of legal information and failure of the state to underline this aspect made everybody fall into this manipulative information, the right of any Romanian to run for office no matter what. The other silent background was the actual power of the Romanian Constitutional Court. The Romanian Constitutional Court doesn't handle only administrative issues. It was debated that the Romanian Constitutional Court is there only to check for legal or administrative issues. But the Constitutional Court has been involved in determining the framework of the political life and the social life on a daily basis. So the Constitutional Court has a lot of influence and has a lot of power, not only on the law, but also on the political and social life. It is there to constitutionalize the law and the social life and the political life. The rule of law must not be called into question. So this is their job. The fact that the institution per se did not present this information accurately, and the fact that the authorities per se did not present the Constitutional Court with its true power and true intended purpose, it's another thing that allowed for this manipulative behavior to go on. Another important aspect is that it guards the compliance with the procedure for electing the president. It also confirms the result of the ballot, and it does so not in a restrictive manner. So it has a wide array of instruments and a wide interpretation. The chronology is also a bit complicated, but it's been underlined by the Constitutional Court, but goes beyond the moment in which they annul the election. The first important moment is October 2024, the moment in which the Constitutional Court discards the candidacy of one of the persons that is running for being a president. It does so under the following reasons. It considers that the candidacy represents racial hatred. there is a failure to respect the statute of political parties and the violation of the constitution. So we already have a particular situation that is not discussed right now. It started in October. Once that happened, we have the first round of election, then the meeting of the Supreme Council of National Defense, which takes place on the 28th of November, then the parliamentary election. And really important is the fact that the informative notes coming from the Secret Service was released on the 2nd of December and on the 4th of December. So we have declassification. Following the 6th of December, when we have the actual decision. And a really important thing regarding chronology is that the 6th of December is also the day in which we have an interpretive declaration of the Code of Good Practice in electoral matters regarding digital technologies and artificial intelligence coming from the Venice Commission. So we have to observe another thing. The Constitutional Court of Romania based its decision on something really up to date, something never before used, something that was created by an international organism with legitimacy, with power, with evidence, and we were the first to use this, writing on that day. So this is really surprising for me as a Romanian lawyer, because I know that the Constitutional Court usually tries to base this decision only on its own powers and only prerogatives. But a sign that the Constitutional Court realized that it has to deal with a bigger issue, with an issue surpassing its own borders, is the fact that it based out its decision also on the Venice Commission that took that decision right on that day. And outside this, it based its decision also on EU legislation, which is again a big step for them. I applaud them on that, but I also like to underline the effort of being fair. I know that evidence was not provided enough. I have my own concerns regarding that, but the Constitutional Court did everything that they could on a short notice moment to provide a proper decision. At this point, what can I say? I would like to underline this aspect that they based the decision on really up-to-date legislation, never before used, and their conclusion was that the electoral procedure was flawed throughout its entire course and at every stage by multiple irregularities and violations of the electoral legislation. And also, there is something very interesting. They consider that the free and fair nature of the vote cast by the citizens was impacted by something which is also real novel at the European level, that the concept of resilience. They use the concept of resilience, which we all know that is linked with some other entity, and refer to the voter, the resilience of the voter. They consider that the resilience of the voter was broken during this procedure by the use of digital technologies, disinformation, and a lack of appropriate information and support. So the free and fair nature of the vote cast by the citizen was impacted by a loss of the resilience of the voter, because the voter was no longer aware of the electoral process, was no longer aware of the proper information. So the resilience of the voter, which is something new as a term of praise for the Constitutional Court, was linked with a couple more traditional reasons. Manipulation of voters' ability to vote, which was linked with aggressive promotion, the abusive exploitation of social media platform algorithms, and the fact that they did this without using any electoral advertising sign. So you have a traditional way of manipulating the vote with the specific lack of markings of electoral advertising, but done with novel technology, done with platform algorithms, with intelligence and artificial intelligence. And this is something new. Also, they underline the fact that we are dealing with a distortion of the equality of opportunity for electoral competitors. But it's really interesting because they underline the fact that the significant exposure of one candidate led to a directly proportional reduction in the online media exposure of the other candidates. So they are saying, in other words, that TikTok favored a particular candidate. In favoring that particular candidate, the other candidates were not really able to present their opinions. This is really interesting because till now we were looking at social media as something which is without limits. It's not like a limited resource. It's not like water. You have a gallon of water, you split it in half. Everybody has enough water. But in this case, they are saying that social media, and in the end, the attention span of a citizen is limited. So a citizen cannot be bombarded by several competitors with unlimited content and still be able to make an informed decision. That's my opinion out of this one line. I believe that the Constitutional Court considers that social media and information has particular limits, and the attention span of a person is limited in a way. So too much content used abusively, using particular algorithms, limits the information that a citizen can get. So the answer wouldn't be for all candidates to use these algorithms. The answer would be to proportionate it, just as in the media. Also, they also consider the financing. So consider that that particular candidate disregarded the legal provisions regarding financing. This was done with a particular way of proving it. So their proof was the candidate presented zero spending on his campaign. It was considered a clear incongruity between the scale of the campaign conducted and the candidate's claim that he spent €0, zero lei for that. So we have an interesting situation because from now on, there's going to be a great pressure upon the bodies of the state that investigate criminally what's happening, because we still need to prove it beyond any reasonable doubt. I believe this is going to be a T0 moment for both authorities and citizens. From now on, if similar situations arise, the outcome can be the same, and this can be like a sort of preventive measures from the Constitutional Court, underlining that anybody that is ready to do an active effort to abuse social media or algorithms will be probably in the same situation and will receive probably the same reply. Also, Romania might have another case before the European Court of Human Rights, because this is definitely something that needs to be discussed further on. And the most important thing, we should remember that the Romanian Constitutional Court, in the current legal and jurisdictional framework, has a power over not only law, but also political life and social life. The Constitutional Court has a wide possibility to interpret things, legislation, and decisions that will impact social, political, and law. There is also the interesting aspect regarding gathering evidence, because I also noticed we get a lot of questions regarding evidence. From now on, we're going to have to be more careful about gathering evidence before the electoral process per se. Till now, we had a particular interest with the period of the electoral process, the immediate period before the electoral process, but not with the years before the electoral process. But now with the artificial intelligence and with the new technologies, probably there's going to be an increasing pressure upon authorities to constantly be on a lookout and gather evidence constantly, because we might be in the same scenario in which something has happened over a span of years. The result will be visible only after this entire preparing process will be done, and the result might be even visible after the elections, for say. And in order to take a decision and to establish the proper framework and the proper situation, you're going to need evidence that cannot be gathered in a couple of days, or evidence that cannot be proof enough just covering a couple of days. So we're going to have a different context in which evidence must be gathered beforehand. The authorities must be on a lookout on a constant daily basis, I would say. And only this way we will be able to take decisions that are not only legally correct, but also fair towards the citizen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dragoș. I suppose I should have mentioned that we were supposed to also have an intervention by Professor Bogdaniancu, but unfortunately he couldn't be with us today due to an emergency. So I'm going to take over the honor or the burden of discussing the rest of the legal framework of the legal issues raised by this crisis from the EU legal perspective, namely what can the EU do in this situation? The Romanian Constitutional Court clearly has attempted to intervene and do something, but the broader legal framework we have available is in the hands of the EU. In this context, from a legal perspective, what I can say is that the EU can act to the extent that it has a competence. And the EU's competence to protect democracy or electoral processes is both an internal and an external one. At the external level, the EU does have a competence to protect democracy through Article 21 of the Treaty of the European Union, which allows the EU, through the common security policy, the legal basis being Article 24 of the Treaty of the European Union, to adopt sanctions against actors, states, third countries, in a broader sense, when they are potentially damaging democracy. And actions of propaganda, disinformation, are types of actions that the Court of Justice of the European Union has in the past recognized as being capable of prejudicing democracy. So we know that from a legal perspective, we have both a legal basis in the treaties to act in this context, as well as jurisprudence that tells us that the protection of democracy mandates that we target and sanction individuals or countries that engage in actions that are potentially destabilizing in this context. And so to this end, the EU has adopted sanctions in this way, starting with the sanctions adopted in October 2024 on the destabilization of Ukraine, which have now been supplemented 2 days ago to sanction both a high military group unit in the Russian state, as well as some head agents in the communication sector of the Kremlin, precisely because of these campaigns of disinformation that they are allegedly carrying out, as per also the intelligence documents that have been released by the Romanian authorities. So since 2 days, since December 16th, now we have a sanctions regime in place through the common foreign and security policy to challenge actions of destabilization via propaganda, disinformation. And that's on the external side. Is this an intervention that the EU can adopt legally, or that comes in a way in an unacceptable violation of the freedom of expression? My legal opinion would be that it is not, that it is acceptable, because in as much as, yes, any interference in a political statement, however acceptable that might be, entails a violation or a limitation of the freedom of expression from a legal perspective, limitations of fundamental rights as per the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU, in particular Article 52 thereof, can exist. Fundamental rights can be limited so long as this limitation is provided by the law and it does not affect the essence of that right. And the jurisprudence of the court in this regard is very clear. And in a way, I would say that it restates Popper's paradox of intolerance in the sense, because the court has been very clear, very keen on noting that the protection of tolerance in this sense, so allowing people to state whatever they want because it is a political position, can come to the extent that this statement doesn't prejudice democracy. So we can be tolerant to the extent that we don't tolerate intolerance. So the Court of Justice has been very clear on setting this boundary and enabling action through the EU's common foreign security policy that limits this fundamental right, to the extent, however, that it is being done against actions of propaganda. What does propaganda mean in this context? It is difficult, because the Court of Justice's jurisprudence mainly deals with cases of limitations of journalism. However, there is a precedent, much old precedent in the court's sanctions jurisprudence concerning the sanctions against Venezuela, if I'm not mistaken, wherein the EU had targeted a politician that had also a TV channel, in the context of which he was inciting to violence, attacking his opponents. So there is a small precedent, a very old precedent, so difficult to apply to a context as digitally developed as nowadays. But there is a precedent wherein the EU has accepted that politicians stating whatever they want and in a way inciting to violence is an act of propaganda, to which intervention via sanctions, for instance, for the EU's foreign policy, is acceptable, would be an acceptable limitation of the freedom of expression. And this is on the external side. On the internal and more relevant side, which is what has been going on over the past days and what the Commission is now doing through the proceedings that it has opened against TikTok yesterday, is platform regulation via the DSA. Because nowadays the EU has is working on adopting an equally strong, or an attempt to a strong legal framework internally, I must say that I use internally in a broad sense because the DSA actually catches threats to public security that are also external to the member states. So it doesn't necessarily have an internal application in this sense. Public security within the meaning of Article 3 of the DSA can also be external. But for the sake of the discussion, because it is an instrument that regulates the internal market, I will say internal. So the DSA, Digital Services Act, is part of, is the instrument that the Commission is relying upon to bring proceedings against TikTok. And it is an act that regulates the internal market, but also has a protective objective as per Article 1, meaning that it wishes to, yes, provide some level of harmonization as to how platforms are regulated at the EU level, but with the intention of protecting fundamental rights and specifically also civic discourse, electoral processes, and public security. Now, as we've seen from the Commission's press release, the particular allegations of the violations of the law that have been alleged by TikTok in this context relate to Article 34 and Article 35. These being the failure to have conducted or the problems concerning the conduct of a risk assessment as required by Article 34 of the DSA, as well as the failure or problems with particular mitigating actions that TikTok or any platform in this context can take once this risk assessment evidences that there has been some that there are some features of the interface or some threats of manipulation that may result in one of the 4 systemic risks that I identified for very large online platforms. These being the dissemination of illegal content, violations of fundamental rights, the violation of threats to civic discourse, electoral processes, and public security, which again is understood in an internal and external sense, as well as the potential violations or threats to public health, gender-based violence, and the protection of child and minors in general. So if the risk assessment conducted yearly, as per Article 34, evidences there are such threats, which TikTok should have done in this context, TikTok would be obliged to then apply some measures to mitigate these risks. And I suppose the investigation that the Commission has now shared reveals or alleges that maybe some of these measures have not been conducted on the part of TikTok, especially because the documents released by the Romanian authorities show that once Romanian authorities had awareness that something was going on in our online space, and specifically on TikTok, they requested information to this platform, who promptly attempted to remove or obscure content by Georgescu in the territorial area of Romania. However, leaving it available, if memory doesn't fail me, in the broader world, which is problematic if you think about it, because there's quite a great portion of the Romanian diaspora that lives abroad. And it is traditionally the Romanian diaspora that supports right-wing ultranationalist parties in the Romanian elections, or it has been specifically in these elections in the previous one in 2020. So at this point, we have therefore some proceedings being brought against TikTok on the basis of these 2 provisions. Why are these 2 provisions being relied upon in this context? They are being relied upon because, in as much as the DSA is an internal market instrument, because it is based on Article 114 DFU, so it wishes to harmonize or remove obstacles in the internal market, it does not create basis for liability. So it creates a regime of liability exception for platforms, because platforms are intermediaries, they provide services. So they're not responsible for necessarily the content that is being placed on the platform, so long as they are not contributing in some way to the illegal content, for instance, because they have knowledge and awareness and they fail to remove it once they are notified, or because of particular flaws in the structural features of the platform, which contributes in some way to the dissemination of this content, for instance. But in general, there is no obligation. The DSA does not create a legal basis for liability of platforms, nor does it create an obligation on platforms to monitor, nor would you want this to be the case. This is provided within Article 8 of the DSA, because we don't want there to be private enforcement of monitoring of platforms by these companies. We want public authorities, and specifically the digital services points of each member state, to be responsible for moderating, for controlling the online environment of our respective member states, as well as electoral life in this context. So platforms do not have this responsibility, cannot have this responsibility legally. And the only way that the Commission really can do something in this context would be through Articles 34, 35. But also for Article 36, which is instead a mechanism that is enshrined by the DSA, whereby in situations of crisis, the Commission can request a certain particular measures on the part of the platform that is allegedly contributing to one of these systemic risks. So to wrap up, because I believe I am about to run out of time, what can we do to protect, to fight disinformation and propaganda through the EU's legal framework? We have some instruments which define our attempt to do something in relation to disinformation propaganda. We have a strengthened code of practice in relation to disinformation. We now have a regulation on political advertising, so setting rules as to what the transparency requirements are for political ads on platforms, something that is what was at issue also in this case as evidence in the decision of the Constitutional Court. We have a democracy plan, which also takes some measures for the fight against propaganda. And we will have, as of August 2025, the Media Freedom Act, which will somehow contribute to the fight against propaganda and disinformation through pluralism in journalism. But on the actual legal level, as to what we can do, as to measures that we can adopt, we have two fundamental interests. And these are the EU's sanctions policy through Article 24 TU and the DSA, but unfortunately within the more limited set of provisions, which are Article 34, 35 DSA, as I've just stated. And on this point, I will close and potentially just answer more questions during the Q&A. And I will give the floor, pardon me, to Eugen. Sorry, I always mix the two names. To Eugen, who's going to, I suppose, elaborate on what I just said, but from a bit more of a philosophical perspective, and really talk about, yes, how do these platforms manipulate? Like, how do they affect our ability to think critically?
Thank you. I will try to gather all my energy, but I have to say I am a bit spent after listening to all of you. It was extremely interesting, and I wanted to follow. So yeah, I come at it from a different perspective, I guess. And maybe I should just start by saying that after the first round, I was quite happy, not fully, of course, with the results, but with how the public discussion went, which is that everybody, just about everybody, at least in my bubble, started thinking and asking serious, important, and difficult questions about how it was possible for more than 2 million people to either vote so marvelously uninformed. You see a TikTok reel with, I don't know if they're called reels, but a TikTok with a guy that says he's against the system, and then you go, yeah, that's my dude, which is worrying, of course. But somehow, surprisingly, even worse, there were clearly some that decided to inform themselves. So then the question was, how was it possible for that subgroup to fall for such? Yeah, you were all very neutral and objective in your describing of the fact, but you know, I work in a social sciences faculty. I don't have to be, so I can just say that that other half fell for what is clearly cheap, transparent, just garden variety bullshit. And by the way, I am using a philosophical term. There's a very nice essay I encourage you to read. It's called On Bullshit by a philosopher that just died recently called Harry Frankfurt. So I said, yes, this is it. The last time we had this discussion was Corona. And since then it died out. We were all tired of hearing about cuckoos on the internet and pseudoscience and everything else. But then, of course, the arguably more important discussion started, which was this legal? What can we do about it? And then the decision of the Constitutional Court came, and fair enough, that's probably the higher point on the agenda. But I do feel that we are back very soon. We were back very soon to accepting what, from a moral perspective, is really a very unfair responsibility which we place on citizens, which is the following. We, and I include me, it's not a fake we typically do not care about the public space because it all falls under this umbrella of freedom of speech. But then, so for three and a half years, the citizen, the man on the streets, the Smith and the Young and the whatever are, well, I guess it's Romania. That didn't make any sense. I'm sorry. But the George and the Georgiana of the Romanian people are just the public, just the audience, just the public, just someone scrolling, whatever. And then all of a sudden, 6 months before election time, they become the electorate. And we expect someone who consumes garbage every single day. I hope for your sanity you haven't tuned into Realitatea TV or Romania TV or anything recently, because you just die inside. And it's even worse on the lives people do on YouTube. So we don't care about the fact that everybody consumes absolute garbage day in, day out. And then we say, okay, ladies and gentlemen, especially young, I really liked your talk, Tana, especially young ones, now you have to act like a responsible citizen. Now our life in the future depends on you. I hope you have been training for this. It is insanely unfair. It's as if, I don't tell you what a rook is or a pin or a fork or how to fianchetto your bishop, and then I send you to the World Chess Championship. Sorry, the World Chess Championship just ended, and we're still quite baffled by the results. Anyway, so it is extremely unfair. It really is extremely unfair, and we have this shared responsibility towards the public space, and very naturally so, we don't really take care of it. So, what can we do? I think that this vague idea of rethinking the public space is not very useful. But before I have a couple of points with what can we do, let me point out two solutions that I don't think will work, which is, first of all, is any type of censorship. I don't think I have to explain in this group why that is a very bad idea, even though on paper you think you can do it by forbidding speech, but that is just, first of all, not working, and second of all, legally speaking, impossible to put together. A second one is to be complacent with an attitude that I think a lot of people are again, understandably pursuing, which is, what are you going to do? It's just, there was a Romanian politician, I don't know, maybe some of you that are older remember she said, not everybody can listen to Schopenhauer. And that is, I think, the answer of elitism, which is to say, well, I'm part of the elite. I know what it means to be rational. I know what it means to think critically. Why should I just kick the ladder? Why should I worry about the rest? So these are two approaches that I think do not work, even though on the face of it, they might seem to be quite effective. At least they don't address this unfairness, this moral problem. Okay, I had a bunch of other things to say in this regard, but I think I will just skip to the solutions. I teach critical thinking and more in the area of technology and engineering, and I see I see all kinds of students, but also policymakers, and there is no silver bullet. Let me start by saying this: there's not. How do you teach critical thinking, or how do you instill critical thinking skills? Is a non-question. It's so impossible to answer it with one take that everything is local, everything is contextual. So I think the first low-hanging fruit that really we at one point have to take seriously is that the Romanian education system is fundamentally uncool and unupdated since a long time ago. I don't know if you had the what shall I say, the interesting experience of putting your hands on a textbook, the manuale, but they are, the language there is really the wooden language from 20, 30 years ago. They look like garbage. The visuals of it, just opening it, they look like someone made them in Windows XP 25 years ago. And I think that the kind of critical thinking that we require from 18, 19, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds is really not all that difficult. It should start in high school. Look at a discourse, react to it critically, look at a piece of pseudoscience, react to it critically. It can start very early. By the way, let me remind you that educația civică, which is civic education, I guess, starts in the 3rd grade. Well, in the 3rd grade, it's more about, I don't know, hug the trees and care for the other. But if you can start there, there's not the step towards thinking critically is not that big. The second one is perhaps a bit colored, maybe not politically, but ideologically, which is that Romania is on paper a secular state, but we still finance, without any kind of oversight, church spending. And I would say that's great. Church is very important. You know, there's things that you can only do through religion and through church, but we've seen that the church is not politically neutral. So the second thing would be get the church out of politics. I'm not sure how to do that. Funding might not be the only one, but get the church out of politics, because the church promotes a type of political participation that is fundamentally dogmatic and fundamentally uncritical. Just get I mean, do I need to remind you that one of them called Călin Georgescu trimisul lui Dumnezeu pe pământ in full campaign and nothing happened? I'm not even joking. By the way, just in between, since we opened it, they said afterwards, no, it's e o vorbă din popor. It's a saying. It's as if. So, which is, yeah, again, bullshit. You should read that essay I mentioned. So get the church out of politics. Education, especially in this regard, needs to be secular, needs to remain secular. A third one, and I have 4, so I have the last 2 ones, is that we really need to look at the public space as a common space. And that means sometimes interacting with people that are on the other side of our bubble, and interacting with people that believe in all kinds of crazy, insane pseudoscience, because it is a political act to clean up the public space. If everything is dumped outside and we go like, no, but in my living room, look, I don't have it, you know, it's all clean and nice. Yeah, but the garbage is outside, so it doesn't matter, because the political game is a public game. So engage with the public space, engage with the pseudoscience. It's not incidental, by the way, that Călin Georgescu was fishing out just random, politically irrelevant pseudoscientific claims about how water is not H2O and landing on the moon was not true. And that's not incidental, because it's the same people. It's the same people. So rethink the public space as and instill responsibility in cleaning up, again, I can afford to say, garbage. And the last one, and I think this is perhaps important in a sneaky way, it doesn't seem to be very important, but we tend to associate education with political education. A lot of people told me, yeah, but you see, even diaspora or highly educated people voted. I mean, basically fell for the bullshit. And I think it's a mistake to think that if you've gone through a university, especially technical university, again, I see, let's say, between 60 and 100 engineering students a semester, right? Probably more. And with some, I have discussions and I get to know them. And everything is around ethics and political philosophy and stuff like that. They are, and for good reasons, they are quite unskilled in approaching a moral issue or a political issue, or being the sort of critical actor that we expect the citizen to be when he or she is in the voting booth. So the last point is that being highly skilled and being traditionally educated is not the same as being politically capable of thinking critically. Again, I'm sure there's other points, but this was my take. To summarize, we tend to look at the candidates and what they did wrong, and it was very interesting to follow that. I learned a lot. I think most audience members did as well. And we tend to think at the platforms, TikTok and everything else, and that is very important. I agree, but it is the voter who is alone there in the voting booth, and there's an unfairness to expect that they will exercise these skills that we trash virtually day in, day out. Maybe not the most optimistic message, but I think this was my one take.
Thank you very much, Eugen. So fortunately, we have very little time left for the Q&A, but since I've noticed that most of the questions, or quite a few of the questions asked, have to do with the sources of information as to the acts that have destabilized elections, I am just going to copy paste in the chat the link to the presidency's press release that lists all of these acts, so that you can at least see these documents and say what the allegations have been. But since we only have 10 minutes left, I propose we maybe take one general question and each of us maybe gives 1 minute or something answer if it's possible, or at least weighs in before we close. And there has been one that is, what is in your view one of the main reasons for which the Romanian population was so vulnerable in this context, and what can really be done? Could you say anything about this in 30 seconds to 1 minute? If I may just give my very, very brief opinion, I have to say that I think this is a very difficult situation, because in as much as I understand that there is quite a lot of illiteracy contributing to this phenomenon and failures on the part of authorities, problems with the rule of law in Romania, there is quite a great portion of those coming from Călin Ceaușescu from the diaspora, and also from a portion of the diaspora that is significantly older in terms of age. And in this sense, I don't see this situation being redeemable without some sort of starker regulation of platforms and of the content that can be posted therein, because there is simply no way that you can educate voters that are above 35 years of age, which is the most significant portion of the population that has voted in the parliamentary elections after the whole mess unfolded. And they are based in other countries, especially in Italy and Spain, which have been the countries that have been contributing more greatly to Călin Ceaușescu's victory in the first round of the elections. So yes, I mean, from my perspective is this, that there has been quite a lot of problems coming from the diaspora, and platform regulation in this sense could help, but difficult. Does anyone have anything else to say, perhaps?
Well, maybe I get the privilege of starting this time, because I was I listened very neatly. I think of course what I said kind of relates to that, but I really do believe that the biggest vulnerability comes from the fact that the dissatisfaction with the political class and with the paid television carnage that takes place every night at televisions that receive money from officially on paper receive money from the political. This dissatisfaction, coupled with the fact that Iohannis, who was the image of the European Union and disappointed so many people, coupled with the fact that the wealth inequality is still quite big in Romania. You have these great supercars and whatever, and everybody thinks that's great. Made them vulnerable for the moment when the unlucky moment when the one time you could vote for someone who I guess in some sense has a claim of being anti-system, in the sense that he's not PSD, he's not NLA, he's not. It was also, I mean, borderline medical case. I think this was the big lack of luck on the Romanian people, but the vulnerabilities are socioeconomic. We have rediscovered how poor socioeconomically, but also in a sense in terms of education, Romanians actually are.
Would any of the other speakers have anything very briefly to say, perhaps? Maybe I'll give a very, very brief chance to Florence to say something in 1 minute, and then move to Tana and Veronica, maybe to Dragoș.
No problem. I will only speak to social network because it's literally my job. I don't do politics, ethics, or law. We don't need the cooperation of TikTok to study TikTok. We don't need the data. If they help, it could be much easier to do so, but to rely on the DSA, on their API and stuff, it's relying on their good faith. They can put things. They can hide if they want to. They can hide whatever they want, and the DSA asked them recently to save overall data for further analysis in this week act for against TikTok, but they will save what they want. But we don't need them. We can study. We can already study them. We have all access, all technology. We just have to work on it.
Okay, thank you. Tana, would you like to add something?
Yes, very briefly. I think that the main reason is the fact that the relationship between the voters and the politicians is broken. And from this point of view, we see politicians that no longer understand what the definition of a politician is. So basically to represent the segment of the people that voted for him or her, and to be able to, take on board the problems and the needs, and to propose concrete solutions. This is essentially the role of a politician, to represent, a community. And on the other side, we have the voters who no longer trust politicians, and because of the fact that there were no measures that have been concretely provided to them in the past year, so they are still in this level of poverty and social exclusion. For some of them, economically, they really resent the high inflation and the cost of living who's getting worse and worse. Basically, they no longer trust the citizens, so they're vulnerable and they're exposed to thinking that anyone else who is not those people, so it's not the system, could be better, in the sense, let's try with someone else. I mean, how bad can it be, if it's already bad?
Indeed. Veronica, maybe, and Dragoș, very, very quickly, so that we can also wrap up.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think it was a fascinating conversation, and to build on what Octav said and Tana said, on the vulnerabilities, I think diaspora, and I'm speaking in double role, because I'm as a citizen of the Republic of Moldova and of Romania, I observe both diasporas, and I think I see quite a big difference. On the Moldovan diaspora side, I mean, we are Romanians of Moldovan origin in the diaspora. We are always coming to save, the elections and get the country into the pro-EU discourse all the time. So I think there is a lot that the Romanian diaspora and Moldovan diaspora could learn from each other. And I don't see any kind of interaction in the diaspora at the moment. So there are no efforts by our embassies, by our institutions in the destination countries to bring those ties together and to, for us, European integration is a desideratum. This is a long-term ambitious goal, and that's something we thrive for. For Romanian diaspora, this is a little bit different. So maybe some have taken it for granted and they are not appreciative of the journey and of the opportunities that EU has provided them with. Countering disinformation, I think our diasporas are exposed to disinformation twofold. In the countries of destination, like I'm based in Austria, there is a lot of discourse on the far right spectrum. So we are exposed on the disinformation in the countries of destination and at home. And there is a lot to mitigate. There is a lot to take stock on. And then one other aspect that I wanted to mention.
To end, because I would like to give at least...
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So I'm going to be brief. As a lawyer, I care deeply about fundamental rights of a citizen. And I think we are in a situation in which one fundamental right of a citizen has been ignored for many, many years. His right to choose his leaders, but not in a traditional and on the paper way that we expect it to be, because indeed we had elections, we had the possibility of voting, we had the possibility of choosing. But I believe that many people in Romania and many people in general feel that this right was not in fact obeyed because they did not get the choice of choosing somebody new. They felt that politicians do anything that they could in order to hold power. They see the same figures, they see the same manner of being treated. So in a way, they are acting against not being obeyed, not being able to choose somebody new. And so they rush to anybody that's new. And this, in fact, will present bad consequences for them and for us. So the fundamental right of choosing should present variety and should present different solutions than in the past. And as a person, I believe that it's also about fundamental rights because we have many people that are isolated, many people that lack prosperity, and many people that are not considered to be part of a community, feeling isolated, feeling unheard, not being able to have access to legal education, or as Mr. Eugen underlined, to a proper understanding of critical thinking. Those are still fundamental rights, and they didn't have access to those rights, and in turn they made bad decisions, or let's say dangerous decisions, or call them as you may, but this could be an explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for participating. I'm sorry that we ran out of time, but unfortunately the discussion was so interesting and it needed to be addressed from all these angles. So thank you all really for coming, and thank you to the participants for joining us with such short notice. Hopefully we will do this again, maybe in Romanian. That would be my hope after the Christmas holidays at this point, so that we can have an even bigger discussion and not just 30 seconds each. But really many thanks again, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Bye.